The last few patches have been quite a disaster in terms of jungle balance, all due to Riot dramatically changing a few jungle items around. The Sata Devourer has basically restarted the hyper-farm junglers and is terrorizing solo queue, and Runeglaive was a total dud that replaced a very general, safe item with a very specific niche item. I called Runeglaive redundant from the get-go as I felt it wouldn't actually help out any actual AP junglers, and I called the Devourer likely to be abused from the get-go, although I feel Riot has given themselves plenty of avenues in which they can tone this item down if it becomes such a problem. The Cinderhulk was introduced many patches ago and dictated the meta into a tank meta, yet still several old school junglers who were meant to be aided by this item turned out to still be struggling. The thing is that while offensive AD junglers will always have the time of their lives, tank and AP junglers still have a slew of weaknesses that only their top champions seem to consistently overcome. This means that the champions that were already good, or at least very passable, just become better while the other ones tend to just stay in the sidelines. Think of it this way: in the tank meta, only a few junglers seem to have been dominant while the rest slinked away in the background or saw little to no improvement. The Cinderhulk did not come into full effect fast enough to salvage the early game problems many tank junglers are plagued with. It only served to push out the late games of junglers much sooner, which is where many tank junglers are dominant. Admittedly, most do see quite a ramp up once they get Bammy Cinder and eventually Cinderhulk. Still though, the tank junglers who are either vulnerable to invasions, have weak damage in comparison to the rest of their jungler type, or simply have low pressure to level 6 are at quite a big disadvantage. Now you may say, what's the problem with this? Most metas only have 3 or 4 junglers that are at the top of the game and the rest are generally ignored. The thing is that we're starting to see the tank meta disappear and we're starting to see a new meta roll in. And this is because of a bunch of nerfs and changes and the addition of new items. Once the meta takes a full swing from tanks, you'll see only the top tanks being played here and there, and most of the other junglers will be coming into play, and a lot of the weak tanks that didn't see much play during the Cinderhulk era are just gonna flat out disappear. They need some sort of wellness change, something that is put in place to ease future balanced decisions and at least bolster the early game so they don't go back to getting decimated if a fighter meta comes back again. As for AP junglers, I already covered their weaknesses on a video dedicated specifically to the Runeglaive, but let's give it a quick recap. AP junglers have weak early games because the majority simply cannot maintain momentum. They are burdened by weak early rotations that are made worse by cooldowns, mono restraints, and weak auto attacks. The AP junglers that manage well right now are either because they're hybrids, have low cost spammable abilities, or have strong auto attacks, or super sustain. In both cases, AP and tank, it is true that perhaps each type of jungler should have a weakness, but it shouldn't be so dramatic. Even if you buff the early game of jungle tanks, they'd likely still be vulnerable to hyper-aggression and counter-ganks, while contributing less damage than many other types of champions when it comes to teamfights. Even if you buff the early game of pure AP junglers, they'll still likely suffer from largely deviated builds, squishiness, and weak early dueling. The problem comes with the machete item itself. The thing is that this is supposed to be a one-shoe-fits-all scenario, and all junglers must buy machete whether they want to or not, and its effects vary depending on the type of champion that is using it. It's not a bad item by any means, of course, but it favors more attack-happy champions than spam champions. The biggest reason having only one branch of items for the jungle is bad is because any nerfs to the core essentials made to tweak an abusive champion ends up hurting many junglers who were just fine with it or only able to manage the jungle with it in its current form. My proposal runs the risk of complicating the issue for newer players, but I honestly think that most players would at least learn some semblance of proper item building by the time they are equipped to actually jungle. Even then, the game shouldn't be balanced around people who can't tell a Coke from a Pepsi. What I propose is to separate the jungle items into 3 branches, all stemming from a different type of start. They will each branch out into 2 exclusive items at the end, with 1 branch for physical champions, 1 branch for tank champions, and 1 for AP champions. While this completely forgoes the idea of diversity that Riot set out at the start, we all know that rarely becomes true because most players are dead set on what they're going to be building anyways, and oftentimes the option to switch items is not even actually there. When you buy the Smite upgrade, it's so early that you often don't have enough information to figure out which one of the 3, poachers might as well not exist, will be the most useful, and even then when you do have information, it actually punishes you for trying to switch. You also commit runes and masteries heavily to a type of build which, for many junglers, restricts what kind of build paths they could take without shooting themselves in the foot. The first build path I'll bring up is the AP jungler build path. I propose bringing back the Spirit Stone as an alternative to the machete. Back when this item was in rotation, it actually helped AP junglers immensely. Its ability to strengthen everything the champion did was an immense buff to AP junglers, although it also did help AD junglers just as much and caused AD junglers to dominate. The starting Spirit Stone should only have a small monster damage boost, smaller than the old machete used to have, and should gain a smaller sustain component of the older Spirit Stone. A percentage of the magic damage you deal to monsters is returned to you as health and mana. The Spirit Stone will also have a new passive that causes all your non-ultimate abilities to refresh 1 second of cooldown after any auto attack on monsters. AP junglers need to have auto attacks that matter or have a better means of spamming their abilities. This would allow them to continue their barrage of spells faster instead of having those awkward 3 seconds where they just fling weak auto attacks at the monsters. There are avenues where this can be tweaked, of course, such as reducing the cooldown refresh value or attaching a Tear of the Goddess effect in which this effect can only occur X times every so and so seconds. They can change the damage bonus depending on whether they need more power or less power. Beyond the Spirit Stone, the item can evolve into its own version of the enchantments, seeing as it's basically just Enchanted Machete type Trailblazer or whatever. I've seen no problem with it just being Enchanted Spirit Stone type Stalkers, and so on and so forth. The items then branch out into 2 more items. The Runeglaive and Magus are both options in which the Spirit line can evolve into. The Spirit Stone cannot evolve into Warrior, Devourer, or Cinderhulk as a result of this, and vice versa. This build path is exclusive to the AP junglers who chose to start with the Spirit Stone and wanted a damage build path. Magus is a great item for AP junglers even if it's a bit bland. It would obviously be the choice for those who are more about casting spells rather than getting into the fray. The Runeglaive, as flawed as it is, would be of course the go-to option for spell weavers. Having both actually promotes diversity rather than preferring one type of champion. The fact that Spirit Stone will not be able to deviate into Warrior or Cinderhulk will strongly discourage non-APs to get it, also including the fact that it only grants sustain on your magic damage. As for tanks, bring back Quill Coat for a throwback sense, but give it a different ability that makes it only suitable for tank champions. Admittedly, this one is more outlandish than the others, and I would be okay if this idea is simply frowned upon. It was difficult to come up with an item that tempers the early game problems of tanks, and making it so it cannot be abused by non-tanks, and still leaves at least some weakness to the tanks. Inspired greatly by Tom's shield, whenever you take damage from jungle monsters, you gain gray health based on the percentage of the damage you take. You also then gain an aura that deals damage based on how much gray health you have. After a certain threshold, it pops, and you gain the gray health as a shield. After the shield is drained, it pops again to deal some AoE damage to the camp. This damage only hurts jungle monsters. The gray health decays slowly after leaving combat, which allows a tank jungler to jump from camp to camp without the fear of not getting the value of the gray health if they kill the camp too quickly. This early shield could also be made to resist enemy champion damage, and as such would help protect against early invasions, which tank junglers suffer greatly against. Of course, this may be too much, so I wouldn't suggest it unless the item actually ends up needing some tweaks. The item would of course evolve into both the returned Juggernaut and Cinderhulk, and will not evolve into any offensive options, so it would discourage offensive junglers from considering Quill Coat. Cinderhulk is a bit of a damage option for tank junglers and offers a bit of a boost to their clearing speed too. The Juggernaut pales in comparison now to Cinderhulk, although some champions would still prefer it for the tenacity and the cooldown reduction. I would propose a tweak for it, sacrificing the tenacity for an active component. At first I had thought to give it a Vayne-like passive in which you gain movement speed when running towards opponents, but that could have been too abusive. A fan then suggested a Guardian's Horn effect. For those that don't know, the item has an active which gains the champion some resistances and movement speed for a few seconds when activated. This could be toned down for Summoner's Rift by making it so the movement speed only applies when running towards the enemy target. The Guardian's Horn also has the added effect that nearby enemy spellcasts lower the active's cooldown, which could be implemented if the item needs a bit of a buff still. Having the Juggernaut actually feel like what the name implies and behave with these proposed changes would make it a great item for initiators and champions who are prone to kiting. Juggernaut tanks would abandon the Cinderhulk aura in hopes of their initiations being enough to carry the match. This would also be a boost to kiteable tanky bruisers like Nasus and Udyr who happen to want or need to be built as a tank due to a certain matchup. So to give a grander view of all this, Machete, Spirit Stone, and Quill Coat would exist as starting jungle items. The Machete favors AD champions, Spirit Stone favors AP champions, and Quill Coat favors tanks. They all upgrade into their own enchanted forms and then upgrade into one of two choices exclusive to each branch. The Machete line ends at Devour and Warrior, while Spirit Stone ends at Magus and Runeglaive, while Quill Coat ends at Juggernaut and Cinderhulk. Each type of jungler has two items that fill a different type of niche. The items are different enough to encourage different playstyles. By no means will adding more items guarantee that we won't just see a certain type of jungler dominate in different metas, but doing so would at least help give more flavor and variety to the jungler types rather than a one-size-fits-all deal that we currently have. It would also open up future avenues which can be tweaked without harming a large number of champions as a result. Either way, this game could definitely use more items, especially ones that actually add variety in the game. If you have your own thoughts and opinions about this matter, then feel free to put them in the comments below. I hope you also enjoyed this video because I had a lot of fun coming up with my own items and writing out the script. Remember to like the video to support the channel and to subscribe if you haven't yet. I have a few sponsors that are helping me maintain this channel, such as Loot Crate and Pro Build Systems. I have links to their websites on the description below. Use my code for a discount, and using my links also directly supports my channel.